you and I had a little disagreement about Facebook. You think Facebook's phasing out. You two are the professionals.
I use it all the time.
But
not for years. It's not going to phase out for years and years and years.
I don't know if there is a better platform. So our family members, we used to have a Post newspaper.
Right.
If you didn't post something on the newspaper, you'd hear about it. That's now our Facebook page. Like if we don't post something on Facebook,
it doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like now that, so we have our 18 to 25-year-old single service member demographic, which doesn't touch Facebook, never heard of it. That's our challenge of who we got to communicate to. But then you got that 26 or 32-year-old new family.
Yeah.
They seem to flock back to Facebook. Like they didn't have it before. They find it.
Well, it is a generational tool, right?
Welcome to The Diligent Leader. Today's episode is Leading with Integrity, and I'm your host, Kalie Jakovics, and here with me I have Alex Vicari, and our special guest today is Chad Jones, the Director of Public Affairs at Fort Meade. Chad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's good. Shucks, it's been, we were just talking a little bit, so I think we've known each other collectively for over 5 years.
Yep.
Just about.
It's been about that. I met Kalie first at BWI Business Breakfast.
Yeah.
And then we got to come over and talk a little bit about some of the great stuff you all do over at Mojo.
Yeah, the old Mojo
and
offices.
We got to have a tour. Well, I had a special tour of the base, installation, which was really cool, which I'll never forget.
Yeah. See, I didn't get that part. I must not have impressed you very much.
You were in the middle. You've seen one.
I know it. That's right. I've been on a base before. It's all good.
So, yeah. Well, let's kick off this discussion. I'd love to, tell the viewers a little bit about yourself, what you like to do for fun, family.
Okay.
Where you're located.
Well, so I'm been around for Maryland for about 17 years. I'm natively from Michigan. Been working at Fort Meade, the nation's home for information, intelligence, and cyber operations for about the last 15 years as a director of public affairs, which is a great job. But when I'm not doing that, I've got wife, 3 kids, and so a lot of stuff with high school. I was just telling Alex, my daughter turned 21 like 3 days ago.
Congratulations.
It used to be like, but they were so nice, and they go out do things now with 21-year-olds.
Now they don't even want to talk to you still.
Right.
Either you're noticing that phase. I don't know about that, but
it's starting to come back. It was more with my wife. And my daughter.
Yeah.
They would just butt heads, and I was always
Switzerland.
Always. But that's a hard place to be sometimes. But no, it's getting great, and so have 3 kids. So my free time is spent either shelling around to basketball or volunteering at the school or in some community organizations. And then when I actually get time to do myself, I like to write fiction.
So very cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to work on publishing, but I really like writing.
Is it more like mystery, drama, sci-fi? Like what's your, like when you say fiction, like what's your go-to?
It's I'm more into short stories. I have written scripts, and I do have a book that I'm editing now that is more fantasy, but really it's more short fiction, short stories, and I've been focusing a lot on Pasadena and in this area.
Really?
Right now I'm doing like a crime drama about
a
lady named Tia. She's an aunt, and she runs and it's odd, we're on Fort Smallwood Road, and she runs the drug loop on Fort Smallwood Loop. So how she came to own that loop is basically the story I'm working on right now.
Are you sure this is fiction? It might be.
I hope it's fiction. All fiction's a little true, right?
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Very
so do
cool.
you writing, right? Is that a good mental relaxation focus for you? I mean,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm a wreck. If I'm not diligently writing,
there you go.
about 40 minutes a day, people just want me out of the house. They don't want me around
Well, I think that's a good transition into today's topic. I mean, because as a leader, you're guiding an organization. You need some sort of mental, break, recalibration. I think is probably the best thing.
especially being the director of public affairs for the entire installation, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be stressful. And kind of, I guess, what are some of those key responsibilities, or what does your day-to-day look like?
So one of the good things about my job is the day-to-day is hardly ever the same.
Okay.
In that, I get to come here and do a podcast today, but it all mostly bases around communicating and connecting. So Fort Meade, outstanding place, largest employer in the state, about 65,000 service members and civilians who work in a vast range of fields. But, a lot of it is communicating to whether it's our internal audience about, hey, this gate's closed, or hey, I get to announce snow days, which everybody loves me for that. But it's also really more of connecting the installation and its impact with a lot of partners outside of the installation. A fort, everybody thinks of it as a fence line, but there is no way that an installation can function without its supporting community.
Oh, yeah.
So building those relationships, whether it's with business organizations, working with politicians on mutually benefiting the whole region, infrastructure, jobs, things of that nature. I get to spend a lot of time doing that and really working closely with the command team on strategizing ways forward and really just bringing different groups of people together to work on common issues. I mean, that is the gist of my day.
So let me ask you a question. So obviously, a lot of people, I mean, how many people over at Fort Meade? Or I should say, when you look at Fort Meade, that installation, and then I love what you said about the community, right?
Yeah.
How many lives and people is that impacting and that are involved in the Fort Meade endeavor?
Yeah. So workforce itself is about 65,000.
65,000. Okay.
Then you bring in family members and residents. So we have about 2,500 homes. So we have about 10 to 12,000 people who live on the fort.
Okay.
But most of our employees are civilians, so we really do touch the entire state. Like if you look at a heat map of where employees are coming from, it's Pennsylvania, West Virginia. Most of them, surprisingly enough, most employees at Fort Meade live here in Pasadena.
Get out, really?
It is.
Would you look at that?
I mean,
right in the dirty
go
Dina.
Dina. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So
Hey, all of us live in the Dina.
I know, in one way or another, it all comes back.
Yeah. So 65,000 family.
Yeah.
65,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And then I guess if our total, because we count all this, we have a census. So we're the second largest Army installation in the United States by population.
Gosh. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. But if you look at our total population of service with veterans and everything else, it's about 180,000 people who use our services in one way or another. So it's a large audience to communicate to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, the businesses and things that come up and that support it, that's a whole nother tale of, we're sort of like the Ford auto. We're from the Midwest.
Right.
So auto factories drove
Hey, we're
a
all
lot of
from
our
the
town.
Midwest too.
That's right.
Yeah. So
Running thing,
collective we. So the installation in a lot of ways does serve as like that big auto plant. Like, hey, everybody seems to have a tie to it in one way or another.
So I don't know, before I pass this over to Kalie, I do have a question. So you have a very large responsibility. Communication is key. Expectations, managing expectations is key. And then you're working with and collaborating and serving a lot of internal customers, like which is what you said earlier. What's your general? Do you have a philosophy or go-to self-check or guide for yourself when you're leading this many people in this type of organization?
So, leading, and I was thinking about this with the questions. My leadership and how I lead, it really comes down to two things, and it is the people. Developing and having, people who feel empowered to do their jobs.
Right.
Because I'll straight tell people when I hire them or bring them in that, a big reason why you will be hired is to make my job easier.
Yeah.
And allow me to do the things that need to be done. So empowering and really creating a work-friendly atmosphere. And then the other part of it really, it sounds corny, it might be military, but it really is accountability.
Yeah.
So if something goes wrong, it's my fault.
Yeah.
As the leader, that's where it has to stop at. But at the same time, when things go well, it's us who,
Yeah.
who did well. And I think when you empower and allow people to do that, that's really, it makes for a better work environment, and it ultimately makes you more successful at your job because you got a lot of people rowing in the same direction,
Yeah.
knowing that they can do what they need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just from knowing you over the past couple years and also just seeing you in the community at certain
Yeah.
events, like I could tell that like you are a great leader. You lead with integrity as well. So it's exciting to be able to know you. And
I appreciate
yeah,
that.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
don't make him feel too good
Yeah.
about it. This
I mean,
is
it's
this is
very
a hard
true.
interview. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, so, just kind of curious. So, have you had any leaders who have inspired you, or do you get any readings? I mean, as a writer, I'm sure
Yeah.
you're well versed and read a couple books here or there. Where do you get your inspiration from?
I've been really fortunate at the fort to serve under a lot of good commanders.
Sure.
I mean, the Army really does, and they've all taught me a little bit different. So I do take from that. The first commander who hired me was a guy by the name of Dan Thomas, and he imparted on me one of the, you are a mercenary for Fort Meade.
Oh,
The
like that.
Army, the Army picks people to do different things for different installations. The Army takes care of itself. You are here to take care of your community. So that has really guided me for the last 16 years because I love Fort Meade. I mean,
Yeah.
I was here in AIT 24 years ago. That's where they teach soldiers how to do public affairs.
Right.
It's at the Defense Information School. So I went there, 24 years ago, and I fell in love. Never been in Maryland in my life before then, and fell in love with the place. And so to come back here, and so for him to hit me with that was important, as well as the fact that he said, you really got to know what you're going to get in trouble for.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things
Wow.
that you can do, if you have integrity and the right intention, that you can do, and you can just sit yourself. Am I really, if I have this event, am I really going to get in trouble for it, or is it going to ultimately benefit the community? So weighing that has always laid on me. Colonel Tom Rickard was an amazing leader. So we get a lot of intel guys at the fort. He was an actual hardcore, soldier, prototypical soldier.
Okay.
And he really imparted on things that you do matter. You might not see how they matter, but they matter.
Yeah.
And so remember that in what you're doing. And then Ed Rothstein, which I think a lot Councilman Ed Rothstein.
That's
I
right.
totally trained him for that job. He knows.
Yeah.
But he is the one who really imparted the importance of community.
Yeah.
To where it was. I mean, Fort Meade was no such agency for a long time, and it was a little bit closed. And then he literally, you could see where one person's attitude, like, hey, we're going to open up. We are going to adopt Baltimore. We're going to work with the people around us. And it's important and it's beneficial. So never be afraid to open up and share your contacts. That's the one thing he always told me. He's like, hey, you're a government employee, which means what you own, everybody owns.
Yeah.
And that includes your contacts. So treat them right,
Hey,
share it
there
freely,
you go.
and you'll see where
You
it
all
can
heard
take
it
you.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so you're leading with integrity. I love what you're saying. You've had these great leaders in your life as well. But kind of shifting into like the communications that you have over at the base at Fort Meade, how are you ensuring that you're communicating effectively, not just to the base, but to the public as well?
Yeah, that is a hard question, because you would think the perception is home of Cyber Command, home of all these digital platforms.
Right,
Communication would be so easy.
Yeah.
But it's really not. And a big part of it is, so talking about those 65,000 employees, about half are on a completely secured network. They don't get to bring their phones into
They're in
work.
skiffs.
Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
So reaching them, reaching their families is always a challenge. And they expect us to, like, hey, you be at the very best. Your website should be the best, all this.
Yeah.
Resource-constrained environment does also come down to us, too. So the perception does not always match reality. So between that and the fact, and I think you guys are probably more experts at this than I am, is that the diversity in how people can get information.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So we are pigeonholed, or really authorized is a better word. Facebook, Instagram, X, website,
Right.
digitally.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
Okay.
We can't go into Snapchat, can't go into
Right.
TikTok, can't go
Right.
into, and we now have an app which we can talk about later. But that is really it digitally, and there are so many pages. But the expectation is that we go out to their pages, and at some point we just had to say like, hey, these are the platforms we're on. Tell us what you want to see on these platforms, but we can't go running after you.
Yeah.
It would be impossible.
Yeah.
Which makes it tough. And so one thing we have found that's actually been pleasantly most effective is just hard copy flyers and
Really?
posters and things of that nature, getting them up in barrack spaces.
Oh,
You can
yeah,
put a
sure.
flyer up in a skiff.
Correct.
You could put flyers up at a child development center where parents are coming
Yeah.
in and, where they can see some things. So doing that externally, we have the Community Covenant Council. I know Gina and Ronnie you're going to be talking to them, great friends of ours, leaders for a long time. Sitting down and actually talking to people and, finding ways to
Sure.
communicate. That's probably
Networking,
Yeah.
groups.
Relationship.
You're excellent
Yeah.
at networking, by
Thank
the
you.
way. I mean, you've taken it to
a different.
Yeah.
That's the goal. So thank you.
Right.
I appreciate that.
She makes friends.
She does. She does. Absolutely.
I don't think I've told this story, to this group anyway, but I always admired Kalie, and when she came on board, it was a great thing, and we got along real well. But I was reaffirmed years later. We went to this networking event. She's heard this story. We went to this networking event. It was like a trade show out of town, and those things they're catered, right?
Yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah.
and so, but still, she was out there taking desserts to people at tables and being social, right?
Yeah.
But you see, that is just symbolic of her effort building those relationships. And to your point, when you're out there, you have to have that outreach. You have to go. The base has to go out there and bring desserts to people, right?
Yeah.
You have to.
Yep.
Hey, but if you're bringing churros and cupcakes to people,
That's
they're-
true.
They
Well,
have
it's
a
a way
welcoming
in.
smile, so
Yeah.
it's like, yeah.
But that's that's a big thing. They don't realize that as leadership, but it really is.
Yes.
Right.
Like you can never be afraid to grab a chair, or if somebody is
Sure.
up on stage and needs the water, be the person that brings the water.
Yeah.
It might make you look servant, but a big part of leadership
Is serving.
oh,
Absolutely. What are you
100%.
kidding me? Oh, yeah.
So, bringing churros, bringing desserts, some people and, usually poorer leaders will look at that. That's above them to do. Get somebody else to do it. The leaders I end up respecting the most are the ones who, can put
You want a
their
case
ego
of water?
aside.
I'll go bring a case right now.
Hey,
Yeah, no, I get
I
you.
definitely agree with that. It's like they need to also have their feet on the ground as well.
Yeah.
Not just
Yeah.
sit at this high tower. So
Yeah.
completely agree with that. So,
So you mentioned earlier, like an app, right?
Yeah.
And I think technology plays a huge role. And you talked about our analogy, and we do see communication goes all over the spectrum. But when you're talking about meeting customers in which they'll receive that and typically gravitate towards that. That is a challenge. I mean, you have so many other channels you didn't mention, and different mediums that are available. So let's talk about this app. Like, what was the purpose of the app, and like where were you at with this?
So our apps with the Army, I'll tell you the biggest challenge about communicating in the Army right now.
Okay, go
All
ahead.
right.
Go ahead.
First, and it will lead to the app.
All right.
Okay, here you go.
Is that we are so far behind. So literally about 10 years ago, we were still calling it the Facebook. Okay, you need a Facebook page.
Yeah.
And leaders were so proud when you could stand something up. And that's only to say that, hey, you should be proud for communicating and transparency, but just how far behind we were.
Yeah.
So with apps, we've actually it's been a long road. So we initially had an app about 8 years ago. We ran it through our resources. People loved it. It was getting a lot of views, getting a lot of use. And then the Army came in, and then they finally decided that, yes, apps are important, but now we're going to make a one-size-fits-all consolidated app that you can use. The premise of it is that you should be able to go to one app to get whatever services you want
Sure.
at any installation. great idea. 100% get it. Our population moves out every 2-3 years. So
True.
to be able
Yep.
to just change your installations on an app is great in theory, but they ran it through Army Air Force Exchange, so it was more of a shopping app. And B, we're a joint base. We are the most joint, non-joint. Joint basing is an official consolidation of resources. We have a joint service base. We have all 6 forces on
You
the
even have Navy
installation.
guys there, huh?
Oh, we have more Navy than soldiers.
There you go. Hey.
I mean,
Go Navy. Go Navy.
I heard that outside of the midshipmen, we actually have more sailors than Annapolis.
Oh, really?
I mean, outside of the
No way.
student population,
That's impressive.
our
Oh,
naval.
yeah, I get you.
I mean, Navy Fleet Cyber, their headquarters for cybers on Fort Meade. And,
Yeah. So I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to take you off the track.
No. So the app was made basically for the Army.
Right.
A Navy guy is like, I'm not gonna. Why would I sign up for an Army app? It does me no good.
Right, sure.
So they developed this thing called Digital Garrison. And
Okay.
it went about 3 years in, and then they found out that the app it wasn't intuitive. It wasn't letting communicators control the information or download information. So after however millions of dollars they spent, now they've started this new thing called My Army Post app. Still has the issue of having Army in it,
Yeah.
but it has at least learned, and so Fort Meade is one of 7 pilot installations for this application. To where you can go through, download, it's intuitive, you got information cards, so now that our tenant and our support organizations, they actually have some ownership so they can control their hours of operations and everything else, as opposed to, there's like a 3-tier system to get something posted on the old
really?
app. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Days at a time and delays,
Yeah.
things that just make an app not successful. They've come back, and we are now the pilot for this new app, which is now it's looking towards where we are moving. It is more successful,
Okay.
but it's also leading a trend to where we were saying, moving away from website-based communication.
Right.
Because even our websites, I think we view more on our phones now than we do
Yeah.
actually sit down at a desktop, or we might have a
Absolutely.
laptop, but
Most,
it's,
It used to be most stats would be a 50-50, but now it's leaning toward
Yeah.
like 75 to 80% of people use their mobile device. I mean, still look at a website, but it's through mobile, right?
yeah. So this app is actually helping us with the content management system to be able to manage most of that communication. Then our website just becomes more of a place to hang documents
Right.
and things that you can refer people to. So we're excited about it. It's got a long way to go. We've only got about 1,000 followers right now, or people
okay.
who've subscribed, but it's good considering we're ahead of the other installations who have the
Right,
app.
right.
But we talk about that population of 150,000 or close to that. We got a long way to go.
Sure.
But at least we're finally working on a product that is more intuitive, that we think will actually draw users.
So you have this app, I guess. So what was the strategy simply to get keep more cohesive communication going, or is there another future bigger plan that the app is just the first step? Just kind of curious as to how the app's going to play in your future.
So that is a decision that the Army is deciding in the Department of Defense. So
Okay, gotcha.
a big part of it right now is, the big decision point right now is, do we get away from standard website communication, which is still
Right.
drives everything?
Sure.
Or do we move it more to that mobile app platform? And that will be something that is done, at Installation Management Command runs websites.
Okay.
So that's going to be done at an organizational level. What they're using us for is, because of our diversity in audience and success we've had with other forms of communication, is like, okay, work out the bugs. What kind of things do they want? You got a work order issue. You see a pothole. You see something. Now you can actually take a picture and send it to the right office, as opposed before.
That's
So
nice.
trying
That's
to find
helpful.
those things.
Yeah, that's great.
But they didn't have it before. We had it in our first issue.
Yeah.
Army took over, left that part out, and now they're coming back like, oh no, people really like that. So those are the type of things that we're going through now. But it should allow us to be more fluid and direct
Okay.
with our communication. With alerts are
Yeah.
fantastic things.
That's great.
and customers will be able to choose what they want to get alerts from.
Right.
So what childcare, things of that nature, they'll be able to go directly to.
You always have to worry about generational marketing, but once you have this app in place, it's going to be easier to push the app for the information, right?
Yeah.
And everyone's going to be going to one place instead of having those different channels or verticals. Like I mean, of course, you'll still announce things on Facebook and all of that, but it's going to be the streamlined area for consistent communication, right?
Yeah, you and I had a little disagreement about Facebook. You think Facebook's phasing out. You two are the professionals.
I use it all the time.
But I have...
Not for years. It's not going to phase out for years and years and years.
I don't know if there is a better platform. So our family members, we used to have a Post newspaper.
Right.
If you didn't post something on the newspaper, you'd hear about it. That's now our Facebook page. Like if we don't post something on Facebook,
it doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems like now that, so we have our 18 to 25-year-old single service member demographic, which doesn't touch Facebook, never heard of it. That's our challenge of who we got to communicate to. But then you got that 26 or 32-year-old new family.
Yeah.
They seem to flock back to Facebook. Like they didn't have it before, they find it.
Well, it is a generational tool, right? It becomes when people are ready to share. What do they want to share? Do they have something worthy to share? Like in what they share, changes, and so I think that you do see people shift, and even in the profession, right? Are they spending more time on LinkedIn? Are they spending? Are they more Facebook? Like sometimes content from a marketing strategy, when you put the Mojo hat on, it's one of those things where not all platforms are the same for everybody. So it's a challenge.
But yeah, I think even for me as a millennial, like I get a lot of my neighborhood, my community. I'm not at Fort Meade, but I get a lot of my information from our Facebook page. So you're totally right. Like it's going to be there for a long time. But yeah, kind of shifting over. I mean, you have some challenges that you're working out, which it seems like everything's going in a good direction.
Yeah.
But in regards to communication, have there been any like crisis, or like how do you overcome any more challenges, right? Like, do you have a strategy for that or something set in place?
Like a case study.
So we have crisis communication, and it varies. So probably so there's an incident that causes a crisis. So like if an organization has we had some issues with our child development centers and things of that nature, which becomes housing. Our housing.
Okay,
Fort Meade was the epicenter for housing. We were actually going to do a BWI breakfast as the keynote speaker when the housing crisis hit.
Oh, yeah.
And
I remember that.
The colonel was ready to be the keynote speaker, and the chief of staff of the Army said, I'm coming to Fort Meade today to talk about housing.
Oh, wow.
Everything canceled because it really was. Reuters dropped an article. Social media was working about the problems with housing. So it was hard. We weren't ahead of it. But using social media and using our tools to at least try to catch up, and then using our various means to get people out to talk and to be honest and transparent as much as we could be.
Yeah.
So you have that. Then you have my worst communication. We do these things called force protection exercises. Very needed. We have to be ready for contingencies.
Sure. They're drills for the layman.
Hey, I'm a planner, so I'm loving hearing all this.
Right. So, active shooter, hurricane hits, any of those type of things. Every year, a couple times a year, we map these things out and how we would respond. So one of the lessons, we have our operations center, and one time we did not communicate well enough that we were having a force protection exercise.
Okay.
And so when people heard, they posted on our Facebook page a real world incident that was really meant to be an exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, the media was like foreign media was calling our operations center.
Yeah.
Asking questions like, I heard you had 5 people die in an active shooter. Is that going on?
Oh, wow.
And our exercise planners were answering the media like they thought it was fake media. And so they're like, yes, 6 casualties, EMS on the way, yada, yada, yada.
Oh, my.
So all of a sudden, this exercise became like an international, because you attack a federal installation, that becomes international news.
Absolutely.
Chief of Staff of the Army, Pentagon calling us, like, what the heck's happening at Fort Meade? Does the FBI need to show up? So in learning with that, what you were talking about leaders, and it gets to it. One of our other commanders, Colonel Nyland, once told me, when you're thinking of communication, you always need to think about who needs to know and who doesn't know. And that's what I learned from that force protection exercise, is that we didn't necessarily sit down to talk about, hey, how to prepare for spillage and what to do with that. And so that is, we do have crisis communication, but that's the first thing I think I ask, or even in preparing for a crisis, is who needs to know, what does spillage look like? What does that initial statement look like? How can we get out ahead of it? And then adjust from there and be transparent as we can be.
So I have to ask, I mean, that's a fantastic story, right? But that gives somebody like yourself and leadership, your co-leaders, right? Time to reflect and saying, what I've been doing. Because a lot of businesses, I mean, all of you that are out there have your successes and failures, and you've all accidentally had the news pick you up in a negative way, potentially, maybe, and symbolically speaking. But how do you now take that, ouch, right, and turn it into a win, right? What do you say to your team? I mean, I'm sure you're not running around and, beating them with a stick, so what do you do as a leader? What is your style? Say, okay, here's how I want to recover from this.
So that's how we recovered was, messed up. And that's where it gets back to my fault.
Sure. Ownership,
getting into the leader and saying, hey, here's where we came short. Here are the things now that we need to do and to prepare for future. So Army loves after action reviews. So we'll take everything. And that was AAR'd for about an hour and a half.
Right.
In a uncomfortable, you don't want to be AAR'd with your commander when he's got the Pentagon calling him and doing all that. But it was good professional development. And it was, you have to be able to take an honest look at yourself. Because one thing I've noticed is when something really bad happens, it is really easy to find another way or another reason why it happened.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if this organization wouldn't have answered this question like that, and they would have followed the process, we would have never gotten into this and deflect.
Yeah.
That to me does not work very well. So owning it, keeping your team accountable. Because, nobody is perfect, but I would prefer to keep them accountable within ourselves and with our team, and then really invite them open to solutions. Because the other thing that at least I have as a fault, I hate when non-communicators try to tell me how to communicate. I hate it.
Sure.
As you should.
Oh, hey, well,
not anybody who's watching this,
Maybe if you do this, or maybe you did that. I posted on Facebook. I got 800 likes. So obviously, I know exactly what you're doing. That drives me nuts. But being able to take a step back and realize that even if it's from if it's from an annoying source, it doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's. So I don't know if you find this to be true for yourself, but I typically, if I'm in a situation, and I don't know about the other leaders watching and what your respective roles are, but if we have a failure, like in our organization, I sit there and say, okay, the first question I ask myself is, did I give them everything they need to have solved this problem? Right. Can I really hold them accountable? Like, did I prepare them? And there was a famous story, I forget where it came from, but it was about this general found some people, hunkered down underneath a little hill, and they couldn't storm the building, and they didn't know how, and they were stuck there. And so the general came up and says, well, here's it, grab a grenade, throw it, and he went in. Like, sometimes you just need to show people that boldness that, okay, you're going to make a mistake, you're going to do this, but it's about moving, and sometimes you need to show them how to move. It's not, you can't just assume, the worst thing you can do, right? You have to set an expectation, you have to communicate back to your point. So I don't know, that's something for me. Like,
100%. You have to show, the Army, it's be, show, do.
Yeah.
So, you have to,
show, do.
You have to be what you're doing. You got to show them how to do it, and then you got to let them do it.
Yes.
And that has really been, that is important with communication. Now, with that, sometimes you should be able to expect a little bit more. So we had a gate runner, guy, and this made national news. We had a gate runner. about 9-10 years ago. It's the only
Okay.
night I ever had to spend in the office. Like, I slept on the floor because a guy crashed from Arundel Mills Mall,
Oh boy.
got into a high-speed chase,
Oh,
blew
no.
by our access control point, hit the fence, and then just hit out on the NSA for like a night.
Oh,
So
wow.
helicopters are flying over and everything. And so when we were communicating that, my new media manager at the time posted on Facebook that, well, the guy got through in between gate changes. At 8:57, he drove through while the guard was changing out rotations, and during that time, he slipped through, and it's like, and he posted that. And that's where I got, probably the most I ever got in trouble for was that.
Yeah.
Because we did just unveil a huge vulnerability.
Yeah.
We fixed it right away.
Sure.
But it goes through that, yes, you got to trust, but it gets back to that thing like that dude should have known.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you
Right.
got hired
Yeah.
for a reason. So sometimes people do mess up. But even with that, you still have to take accountability for it as a leader.
Sure.
You have to go off and fix it.
Well, Chad, thank you for sharing all of this with us. I think taking away as, you as a leader, accountability, integrity. I know that you're.
Yeah.
It's
Did we
just been-
fill our half hour?
It's we're coming up
gosh,
on
yeah.
time. We gotta. Well, I think we could.
See, 'cause we're having a
literally
good
talk-
time.
Trick me.
We could talk for I think at least another hour because I have so many more questions for you.
Because I'm
but-
usually the guy that does this, so when I'm speaking too long, I'm usually the guy
Like,
to
come
like
on,
give the
let's
wrap
go.
it up.
All right.
So
All right,
the
guys.
fern was not doing its job. No, thank you very much. And if there is anything you ever want to learn more about Fort Meade, come out on a tour. Alex, you're always invited.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
Is there any advice or
Yeah.
anything that you want to leave our viewers with today,
Yeah.
or even how you see, the vision of Fort Meade? Anything you want to share with us?
So Fort Meade it's a great place, and we do a lot of, we defend the nation at Fort Meade. Like, you look at
Right.
places that are called power projection platforms, you think of tanks in the Army, you think of
Yeah.
planes. What people do not realize at Fort Meade is that we are projecting cyber power every day. You hear something that happens in the cyber world,
Yeah.
and there is a response. People deploy to Fort Meade to do their wartime missions. And what gets lost in that, and a lot of the work we do, is that those service members and those civilians who are doing that work,
Yeah.
they have an awful lot of stress. Like, they're doing their jobs. And when they do, they come out and they move back into, they come into our community.
Yeah.
And so the community's role is not just about infrastructure and things about that nature, but just really showing appreciation and recognition of the things that are being done at Fort Meade. How, vital it is to the area. And if anybody ever wants to find out anything about it, my Army Post app or home.army.mil
Very good.
/Meade. To find out the work we do, and we are always, so with leaders here, we are always open for partnership. I mean, there's
Very good.
legalities and things with it, but 100%.
Yeah.
right.
In closing, give me your best quote you ever had from a leader or any
That's a lot
advice
of
anybody
pressure.
gave you. Oh yeah, I'm going to give him pressure.
Oh my gosh. Well, the best quote I ever had is a drill sergeant once told me, your mother didn't know whether to call you Mo or Ron, so they named you Moron. That's probably, but in leadership, it's, I don't know what the best single piece of advice has been other than, gosh dang it, I wish I had something. You did put me on the
I
spot.
did put you on the
Alex.
spot.
Yeah.
Trying to think about the best. The most useful has certainly been think about who needs to know. That has certainly been the most useful piece that I've carried with me. The most profound, it's,
Well, I think
don't know
you
yet.
But I think there's still so much to learn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think profound's a strong word, but I think hearing that truth of that leadership quote that you had
Yeah.
is it says it's in your everyday, and you got to find
Yeah.
those things to latch onto you. So Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And
Yeah,
for our
absolutely.
viewers, so we had Chad Jones join us today.
Are we back on this?
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Director of Public Affairs at Fort Meade. So again, Chad, thank you so much. And
you,
I'm
Kalie.
one of your hosts, Kalie Jakovics, and with me.
Alex Ficari.
So thanks for joining, and make sure you like and subscribe if you want to hear from more of the leaders in our community. Thanks.